if you get to show up to work like this all day, that's like your heaven, right? If you're showing up to work like this every day, you might not be conscious of it, but this is really kind of like somebody's hell. And this is not sustainable.
You're an inspiration to our entire organization.
Welcome to the Gym Marketing Made Simple podcast. We're going to be talking the done-for-you marketing and sales strategies proven to work with boutique fitness gyms to increase quality lead flow and grow your revenue. Don't try to be a professional marketer and waste tons of money. Let the experts at Lasso do it for you. And now, here are your hosts, Blake Ruff and Sherman Merritt.
All right, guys, here we go. Another episode of Gym Marketing Made Simple. I'm Sherman, here with Blake. Today we have Brian Alexander of Ready, Aim, Climb. Brian, thanks for hanging out with us today, buddy.
Yeah. Thanks. I'm excited for this. This will be fun.
So, obviously we go way back. I'm excited to talk about, with this being a podcast for gym owners, with you being a previous gym owner. Just so everyone knows, if you don't know Brian owned CrossFit at the moment. He had the coolest gym that I had ever been to. This man had a coffee bar in there, all this equipment, and how big was that gym?
17,000 square feet. Too big.
Too big, but it was awesome though. You could do everything. It was awesome. So, Brian, let's talk a little bit about what you're doing now, because you help us on the business side, but specifically we're going to talk about the PI stuff. Like, if you guys aren't familiar with the predictive index stuff, this is going to be a great episode for anyone that struggles with hiring the right people, because we know hiring the right people is of the utmost importance, because when someone wants a job, they'll say that they'll do whatever you need until you get them in the right seat, or the seat that you thought was the right seat that you figured out, 1, they hate it, 2, they're horrible at it, 3, they can't do it for long. Then it's a bad situation to be in. So we've been working with Brian for a while. So Brian, let's talk a little bit about the PI stuff. Like, what is it?
Sherman, why don't you start with how we use it at our company?
Why don't you start with how we use it?
Fair enough. So I think the main thing former gym owners and everybody listening to this, we realized, and me especially, I've had really bad hires. It cost me a lot of money, right? Moved somebody across country, a lot of different things that the end be all of hiring a bad person is going to cost you way more than investing in it and finding the right person long term. So at Lasso, and I 100%, I know Sherman, you agree, probably all of us agree that we wish we would have done this forever ago. Not only knowing who is a great person to hire, but also knowing how they're wired helps you communicate to them in a way that they understand, right? Like, whether they're detailed or like entrepreneurial, like they're just big thinkers and skip over every step, like probably we do. But just knowing all of that helps you manage them better and understand if they don't do something, why they don't do it, right? So at Lasso, we don't hire anybody anymore that doesn't take the test, because we have to know who's the best candidate. So, for us, it's been absolutely game changer, just knowing these are the right fits for our team and our culture and what we're looking for, so that long term, we're not replacing people and they're happy. And we know in a few months or 6 months what they might be pushing against, so we can give them either more space to grow or they need more defined roles. Sherman, anything to add?
Yeah, no, I think, like you talked about, taking the test, for me, that's sort of that goes without saying, right? We're not hiring anyone on Lasso's team that doesn't take that. I don't even know if it's called a test. It's not like pass, fail, but right. You take this assessment, and then on top of the assessment, Brian's doing stuff on the back end where we are figuring out the role, the type of person it's going to take. So we sort of create the role before we even send out the assessment. That way, when people come back saying, "Oh yes, I'm great at this, I would love to do this," Brian's on the back end saying, "Listen, guys, I know they say that, but I see potential pitfalls here," and I'm just, at this point, we're like, "Oh well, if you don't think it's going to work, sorry guys, this isn't going to work," because for so long, pre-Lasso, we hired just based off emotions and feelings, and I like this person. But I think that if people could really get a hold of this, Brian, I think it could change. I mean, gyms in particular, because everybody wants to be, they're coaches and they do this, but then as you become a coach, oh well, I need them to do a little bit extra, you know, and then you're putting people in the wrong seats, and it's just down the road, it's just causing so much stress and heartache and headache. So let's talk a little bit, Brian, about the PI. Sort of give us a little background on it, because I don't think many
Yeah.
people know about it.
Yeah. So, my genesis into assessments came from my experience with owning gyms, uh, getting it wrong many times, banging my head against the wall, and trying to figure it out. But also, I had the opportunity to be a gym mentor for a company called Two Brain Business. I was one of the founding mentors, and I had hundreds of phone calls, maybe probably 1,000 over the course of 4+ years. And no matter how buttoned up the systems were and the processes were and the SOPs were, um, both my gym and other gyms kept running into the same problem. And all business problems actually are people problems, is what I found. And it was just really kind of annoying to me that we didn't have a solution for it. The company was so data driven in everything they did. But when it came to people, gym owners were just winging it, literally winging it, going off their feelings. Usually we hire people that are most like us, right? We like people that are most like us at least, but that doesn't always mean they're good for the role that we need them to execute. And oftentimes, people who are not wired like us are the most fruitful business relationships, but they annoy us the most at times because there's a little bit of friction if you don't really appreciate the differences in strengths of individuals. So it was just like this kind of point of realization where I'm like, we teach the what, we teach the how, but we completely ignore the who. And this was like before Dan Sullivan's book, Who Not How. I remember there was a big Two Brain Summit and we had a bunch of gym owners come in and I gave this crazy talk about hiring the right who for the what and the how. And I think it was a little bit premature and nobody really understood it as well. Um, but usually, if you're a business owner, the people that really understand it are the people that have already gotten it wrong and then felt the pain of getting it wrong. In particular case, I did that multiple times and I took massive gambles. I got it wrong a couple times. Number one, I got it wrong with my wife. I put her into a position where she was just miserable. So she was a little more detail oriented than I was, but we're both not very detail oriented. And I'm like, well, she can handle all the details. And I offloaded all of the details. So I was a visionary. I tried to make her an integrator. She was not an integrator. And I basically made her miserable and ruined our marriage, right? I definitely hurt our marriage a little bit. But through these assessments, that's really where I was like, okay, either everybody keeps failing me, or I need to turn the mirror around and look in the mirror and say, maybe I'm missing something. They can't all be idiots, right? It's like one of those things. And so I took my first assessment. It was the Colby assessment, completely blew my mind. It was just like something that I just gave to everybody. I'm like, look, this is who I am. I can't even explain it better than they've explained it. Just read this. This is exactly who I am. And that kind of, morphed over time. We began using that with gyms. And then I ran across the predictive index, which covered a little bit more about like motivating drives and kind of needs and behaviors for the workplace. And that was really kind of like where I got into what I'm doing now. It's just consulting with companies large and small, gym owners, roofing companies, all the way up to I have a national paving company that they do $250 million a year in revenue, and it's a massive company. But the fun part about it is people problems are people problems. I don't care what industry you're in, how big your company is, as well. If I can solve a people problem and save you from a mishire, then it's worth it, right?
Yeah, I think, you know, you and I, we've been friends for years and years. I mean, we met at Two Brain. Shout out to Two Brain. Uh, I think and I remember when I was first talking about starting Lasso. I remember I reached out to you and said, "Hey, like I really like this Blake dude, but like I've never had a partner. Like I don't even know if Blake knows this. I was like, I've never had a partner. I don't know how this is gonna work." And then you were like, "Well, let him take the
Brian
test."
messed
I'm
up
just
on this one.
and, and
What's
then
Yeah,
that?
Brian,
he got. I said Brian messed up on this one. He got this one all wrong.
and Brian was like, "Well, let him take the test." And then I remember me and you talking through it, and then we were like, "Hey, like this can work. There's a potential," but I think that now, looking back, I hope that all companies, but specifically gym owners, can really get this hiring piece right because you hire the right people, get them in the right seats. Like it's just a game changer. I think that's one of the things at Lasso that allowed us to have so much success so quickly is that we don't, like we just don't hire because this person seems nice. It seems like seem like they'll be a good fit. I mean, that may be the case, but you're still getting the assessment. We're still going to create that job role, and Brian's going to tell us if he thinks this is going to be a good fit or not based on results, and then we'll go from there. So like it's definitely a game changer. Um, Brian, like so with the companies that you work with, large and small, um, do do a lot of the people that lead, like, do they push back on some of the results, or like how do they take it? Because Blake and I, we've sort of been like, hey, we know you, we trust you. You say it, like we're taking it to the bank. But like, is that always the case?
It's not always the case, but oftentimes when people read their results of the assessment, I'd say 99% of the time, when you read that predictive index result, you're like, how in the world does it know this much about me by it's literally a 5 minute assessment,
I
right?
agree. I agree.
Uh,
My mind was blown. My mind was blown when I read. Mine was just like, this is crazy.
Yeah, and so here's the thing. There's a fun fact. There's 800 plus assessments on the market, and your listeners, maybe I'm sure have taken, if not one, maybe two or three or more, right? But out of those 800 assessments, there's only a small like handful that are scientifically validated to be used for hiring and selection. So that means that the data is reliable and repeatable and stable over time, but there's also 350 plus validity studies on predicting long term success in a role using behavioral data, like the behavioral assessment and then the cognitive assessment. So it's not like, astrology. This is it's a behavioral science, and there's scientific validity to it. Now, using the right tool for the right job is critical. You wouldn't want to cut a steak with a spoon, although you could. Really, you should be using a steak knife. When it comes to hiring, out of those 800 assessments, there's less than 10 that are actually scientifically validated for hiring. They're meant for hiring. So all assessments are good, but they can't do all things. But that's why we're so confident in the data, because it's the process of it all. It's not just that assessment, it's actually the process of defining the behavioral requirements for your exact role and then lining up all your candidates against it, measuring kind of the fits and gaps to make sure that behaviorally they're a good fit for the role. Now, culturally, they have to fit your company as well. They have to align with your core values, live and breathe them, of course. So when you can couple those two together, that's a multiplier for success in the role. And if there's one thing that you kind of take from this whole thing, I always use this analogy, and this will stick with you, I hope. So your natural hardwiring. So if you took a PI, your hardwiring is basically like this rubber band in its natural state, right? It doesn't take much energy to stay here. Now we can all do and be anything. We can stretch, right? But it's going to be under constant tension, energy, and effort. And then the moment you let off of that artificial tension and energy and effort, you snap back to your natural state. So, like Sherman said, I think any great leader can get people to follow them, and they're going to rise to the occasion. They're going to say, yeah, I want to work with Sherman, or I want to work with Blake, or want to work with you as a gym owner. they might not be self-aware, so they'll take on anything and they'll say, okay, I'll just figure it out. I'll grit it, I'll bear it. And for you, you're probably like, I just need a hot body in the seat. I like this guy. Let's give him a shot. But you're actually not doing them a service by putting them into the wrong position. It's like you're actually probably going to end up hurting that relationship and becoming a little bitter and resentful that they're not living up to what you thought they should be doing. So now, while we can stretch in natural and unnatural ways under constant tension, energy, and effort, the minute we see performance problems, it's usually because of that stretching or when it lets off. So that individual might come out of the gates hard for the first 90 days, but after 90 days, you see somebody completely different in the role, and you're like, man, what happened? I thought I got this one right. I thought that person was going to be a rock star. And that's what happens. I mean, this is literally what happens when there's either lack of engagement or performance problems happening. People don't just snap back to who they are, and they're like, oh, I can't do this anymore, or they perform poorly. So another analogy that I use is, I use a starting lineup for a basketball team. You have a point guard, shooting guard, small forward, power forward, and center, and they all play their positions well. They all have their unique attributes that allow them to play their position well. But what happens if you pull them off the court and you put the point guard at center and the shooting guard at small forward, and you throw them back onto the court? They're still playing basketball and they're still playing the game they love, but now all of a sudden they're going to work every day getting beat up. They're really ineffective in their role. The fans are upset. The coach is upset. And it's just kind of a mess. And that can all be avoided just by understanding who your point guards are. If you need a power forward, hire a power forward. Don't take a point guard and try to make them a power forward. They're never going to be a great power forward. But if you put all the skills and drills into making them a great point guard and identifying that early on, they could be a great point guard. And it's all about self-awareness, but it starts with the leader. If you're not self-aware and you're not aware of your own strengths and weaknesses, then it's going to be very difficult to identify that in other people as well.
Yeah, no, that's good. Like that's good because I remember first time when we started hiring folks, and when you were like, well, we need to create the job role so that we can get the right. I was just like, why are we creating this job role, bro? Like we need to hire someone. Like we don't have
Yeah,
time to
yeah,
be creating job roles. Like we need to get somebody in here.
yeah,
But now being on the other side of it, the job role is probably the most important piece because once you know what you need, obviously there are people out there that are going to fit that role perfectly, but you need to know exactly what you want because if you don't know, because I remember you asking Blake and I, well, what exactly? And we were sort of like, well, we don't know. You like, no, you guys have to figure this out because once you have it locked in, then we can find someone that's going to fit the role. They're going to do a great job at it, and you're going to be happy. And I look back at all of our hires, like all of our hires have been solid, great hires, right? Like hasn't been one of those things where someone's in the role 30 days later, 60 days later, I'm pissed. Blake's
yeah.
pissed, So it's definitely been a game changer with that. Um, Blake, you have anything?
No, I remember you using that back in a seminar, and that really hit home when you're talking about like having people on the right bus but in the wrong seat,
Yep.
right? And I think that like really, like you might have the right players, but they're all just doing the wrong things, right? And I think maybe this isn't a good question, but like I think it's hard when you talk to gym owners and they realize, oh crap, I put somebody in the wrong seat, right? I got a GM that should just be a coach, and
Yep.
that comes with like a pay. So maybe this goes into leadership more, but yeah, I think that's a good question, right? Like, what if you realize, holy crap, everything just went to junk? Like, I got all these people. I got a GM that should be a lead coach. I got a lead nurture person that hates people, and a coach that just isn't following anything. Like, do you
Yeah.
just fire everybody and like start over, or like what's the process?
Yeah, that's amazing because remember, if it's a small company or a large company, I'll go into large executive teams and we'll go over this and we'll start talking about, okay, well, what do we do now? So you're not going to just go in and fire everybody, but having those job targets defined for every role. That's kind of like your starting point, like measure twice, cut once kind of thing. Ideally, you're going to do it before you hire somebody, but if you have a company that's rolling already, you still want to define those job targets. You still want to give your employees the behavioral assessment, and then you're basically going to measure them against the job they're executing. And there's going to be either clear fits or there's going to be gaps. Now, usually there's some gaps. It's just no matter how good of a executive team you have in a big company or a gym, it doesn't matter. Like people, this is the hardest thing to get and nail down blindly. Like if you're not using objective data. So I don't care if you're a gym or a huge company, everybody's messing up until they have data. Now they might be getting by, but they're not doing it as efficiently and effectively as they could. But when you have somebody who's in the role and they don't align with the job, we have very specific ways to help them basically stretch, right? Very specific coaching instructions for every single drive that we're measuring. And all we're measuring is motivating drives, and then we can predict needs and behaviors based on those drives. So it's really interesting. A picture's worth 1,000 words. And when you see that PI result, I can literally talk for about an hour about an individual based on 4 little dots on a piece of paper. Now, 4 little dots on a piece of paper superimposed against the job they're executing tells me a lot more. And that's where we really come in and say, okay, is this person going to be a good fit for this role long-term? Can we carve off a piece of the role where they don't fit and move that to somebody else? Or do I need to look for if they're a really good team member and you don't want to lose them? Because we know if you have an A player, you don't want to lose them. It's very difficult to replace A players. So maybe there's a different role that they might be a better fit for. And the software basically has an algorithm that shows you all job fits for all employees versus all the roles that you have. And I think that's a really good way to keep your A players around and also create like a nice career roadmap for them as well to make sure they're constantly growing into something potentially, a little more in line with how they're naturally wired. If you get to show up to work like this all day, that's like your heaven, right? If you're showing up to work like this every day, you might not be conscious of it, but this is really kind of like somebody's hell. And this is not sustainable. This is.
No, that's good. I'm glad I'm an A+ player. The data
That's
told me
right.
so.
A plus 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 3
A
plus.
plus. So if anyone that ever let me go, you missed out. Oh
yeah,
man, too far gone now.
yeah.
No, no, but that's good though because again, like with us, right? Like we work with so many gyms. We work with so many gyms, and that's one of the big things that we hear. You know, oh, everything was going great. I just had to let this coach go. I had to let this person go. Uh, it's just not working. Or even if they haven't built up the courage to let him go, it's just like it's just not going great. But she's a nice person. He's a nice guy. So we're just gonna try to make it work. If we can get people to buy in to hiring the right people from the jump, I think it changes entrepreneurship. Right?
Yeah.
Imagine Blake. Imagine the amount of stress that you would have missed out on had you not hired that one coach.
I was gonna say, don't mention names. Yes, that was. Yeah, I mean, not. Here's the thing, though. It's. We're not even talking about stress just in the work life, right? Like that follows over to your family, like your relationships, all of that, right? Like having the wrong people doesn't just like you carry that stuff everywhere. Like you're stressed about it all the time, right? You're answering stuff you shouldn't be. You're like, and so I'm thinking, I think a great question, like a gym owner, right? Like all the roles are important. What would you say that somebody is like a true entrepreneur, like vision, like big thinker? Who do they really need? Like I'm thinking about like the gym owner that needs like, hey, I'm about to hire somebody to like kind of replace myself. I'm tired of doing this, being like the man all the time. Who's the next person? Is it based on just like your test, or is it more like, hey, most entrepreneurs need this type of person?
I think every situation is different. I think you have to really define what that looks like. You might just need an integrator to kind of take your place if you're a visionary that's not really big into details. Um, but you might be able to be a great leader of people. What I noticed was I needed a number two, and I was desperately trying to find a number two, a second in command, which is always like an integrator. I'm a big picture visionary. But being a business mentor at the time for gyms, I was proficient at the integrator role, but it was wearing me down, and it was actually taking me out of what I did really well, and it started affected everything and everyone around me because I was in the wrong seat now. So I think that number two is critical, especially if you're a visionary. An executive assistant, I think, is a no brainer. Usually for a gym owner, just to handle all the back end admin stuff that maybe not be client facing or customer facing, but has to get done. Oh, there we go. Don't
Yeah,
ever
you're
give a
good.
thumbs up. Don't ever give a thumbs up on Riverside. Um, Coaches, depends on, actually how you want a class delivered. That matters. If you want it warm and fuzzy and you expect that coach to coach 5 classes in a row and maintain that warm and fuzziness, I'll tell you exactly who not to hire as a coach, no matter how good of a technical coach they are. So your client and customer experience plays a role in this as well. So there's just so many different things that come into play for every position. But if you're a visionary gym owner, which I would imagine most gym owners are visionaries, but I shouldn't assume I was. You need a second in command to basically, run the gym, operate the gym, and make sure that you're not taking yourself out of what you do well. And yeah, I hate to use the word magic, but you have a unique gift that allows you to build this thing probably out of sheer will and charisma. So for you to try to just live in the weeds and the spreadsheets, although it's important to know your data, you might be doing everybody a disservice by playing the wrong position. You're trying to play a power forward, and look, you're probably a point guard, and trust me, you're going to be miserable playing power forward, and everybody around you will also be miserable by you trying to play power forward.
I feel attacked. I feel attacked. Um, but I think like I look back at it, like I go back to these personal things, and I remember you us talking about Lasso before it started, and Blake and I, and this and that, and I didn't totally get it, but now, what 4 years later, I get it. Like, Blake and I, we're opposites. I'm good looking. He's not. He's into the details. I'm not. Like, but no, but seriously, like, Blake
Yeah.
is Blake enjoys the stuff that I don't want to do,
Hmm.
and
I
I
don't know if I would
enjoy.
say enjoy. I just do it and can do it long term and just do it.
Yeah,
Well,
I don't know
correct.
if I love it.
that's what
Cor-
matters. So Sherman,
yeah,
Yeah.
imagine this. Imagine me and you knowing what we know now, but just reverse engineering this, had this great idea to start Lasso. And because we like each other so much, we're like, hey, we should do this together. And this is what always happens with partnerships. People bring in other people to a business because they want, I think it's they don't necessarily know they need the opposite. So it's kind of like a weakness of like, I just want to do this with somebody else to kind
yeah.
of like lighten the load. But now we know Sherman and I are literally wired almost exactly the same in both predictive index and Colby. So Sherman and I would have whiteboards full of ideas with nothing done, nothing implemented, nothing executed. And we'd still be messing around. And maybe we would have got smart and hired VAs and done all this other stuff. But more often than not, we want to partner and work with people who are like us. And again, that is not always the best thing to do if you want to get things done. So having that data, looking at how Blake was wired from a Colby and PI perspective, it's just such a better fit to build a business when you have two people who are wired differently that could basically fill each other's gaps. and really complement each other rather than just kind of clone each other. Two clones of an individual, not the best for partnerships, for sure.
Yeah.
Here's a question for you, and I think maybe you mentioned this to us. So, what's the cost associated with making a bad hire?
So it varies, right, on the position or the level of the role. If you have a mid, like in the corporate world, we'll start there, and we'll kind of bring it down to the gym
Mm-hmm.
world because the gym world is unique and different. But in the corporate world, mid-level manager, $100,000 a year salary, the cost is three times that to turn that position over. Meaning to hire somebody and then lose them, and then have to bring somebody else in, and the cost, really are um, it's recruiting, it's time spent interviewing, it's onboarding, and then it's training, but also the time lost when you lose somebody. The entire team, including the business owner, and if it's a company, an executive team, they all have to stop doing what they're doing and fill that gap of that person who's left short term. But it takes them off of their game, reduces their bandwidth and focus on what they should be doing, and that's where those multipliers come in. Now, a gym owner, let's say you have a GM, maybe they're making 50 grand a year. You can still pretty much confidently say at least double that for a general manager for a gym. Um, it's very costly. I think sometimes, as Sherman kind of alluded to, people just say, I just need a hot body in the seat. I don't care. I'll deal with it. But, in my perspective, and I deal with a lot of like P&Ls with larger companies, if you actually put the cost of turnover as a line item on your P&L, that would just completely shock you and you take it a lot more seriously. But we tend to kind of just brush that under the rug and we're like, all right, we'll get somebody else in the role. And you might turn the position over once or twice. That could cost you a couple $100,000 without you knowing it. So it's really important to get it right. I don't care what it costs. The cost of getting it wrong is so expensive.
No, I get that. No, for sure. So, man, I feel like we've given a ton of value in this one. We're gonna have to have you back for part two because we're working on something big right now on the back end of Lasso, and we need to get together about these new hires we're about to make.
Yep.
But I think that I know for a fact from this episode you're gonna have some people reach out. So, people that want to get in contact with you, how do they do that?
So two ways. If you go to readyaimclimb.com, you can take the assessment for free on my website, and I'll send you a 5-page detailed report kit of how you're wired. And again, it's your motivating drives in the workplace and then the needs and behaviors you can predict with it. But there's like 5 unique different reports that get spit out from that. At a very minimum, super valuable for you to know as a leader from a self awareness perspective. And then, really, if you want to learn a little bit more on your own terms, my book, How to Succeed in Spite of Yourself, it's a really easy read. It nails all of this stuff. It's kind of written in a story format, kind of like Go Giver, but super simple read. I think you'll find value in that as a leader of people in general. And I talk about a lot of the concepts in there as well. So that's the easiest way to kind of dig a little bit deeper. Sherman, I'll share the link with you so you can pop it up into the Lasso podcast as well as the Facebook group as well.
Good. Yeah, you guys should read that book. If you like point guards, you'll love the point guard in this book. That's
That's
all I'll
right.
say.
That's right.
Read the book. Read the book.
Read the
No,
book.
but seriously, guys, reach out to Brian. Let him have you. Reach out to us. We can give you Blake and I. We can give you more about our experience. But we just wanted this episode to really be about getting the word out on this because we don't want you guys to make bad hires anymore, right? Like make the right hires so we can take these businesses to the next level, guys. So Brian, seriously, man, thanks for hanging out with us. We know
Yep.
everyone's time is busy, so thank you. And guys, as usual, tell a friend to tell a friend to tune in, and we will chat with you guys next week. All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to the Gym Marketing Made Simple podcast with Blake Ruff and Sherman Merricks. We hope you enjoyed. We believe marketing should increase revenue and not waste money. So book your free call today. Head on over to lassoframework.com. That's LASSOFRAMEWORK.com and find the right words, get more customers, and increase your revenue. We'll see you here next time.